So Joe Biden has finally made his VP pick, and of all the candidates who it might have been, there's a whole wide range of people. He's gone with Kamala Harris. Now, the Trump campaign have pretty much from the outset shown that their angle of attack here is going to be to frame Kamala as this member of the radical left, and the Biden campaign is going to hope the loony left, and the Biden campaign is going to hope that she reaches out to both sides of the aisle with her record as an attorney and her record voting in the Senate, and hope that she can deliver the progressive votes and still appeal to those more moderate swing voters in the battleground states.
It's quite unique just how polarizing she is, right? I mean, if you look in the BBC article that we have on screen now, you have three different opinions. Fox News calling her a radical, whilst other people are also calling her the most liberal senator, and other people calling her a moderate.
I think at this point there is no element of any campaign that cannot be described as divisive at this point. This is just the state of not just American politics, but British politics, certainly, as we're fully aware, and it's creeping into a lot of European politics as well. It's this, I don't know if you maybe call it the wave of populism, whatever you want to call it, but certainly that war, isn't it? That divide, culture war, that divide between the right and left has been amplified now, and it seems very much that being able to occupy that centre ground is becoming harder and harder. It's a pick a side type scenario. So, in terms of where she actually stands. So the BBC, we've got a BBC article here. Where does she stand on key issues? And I'd say, I mean, for the BBC, they seem to have done a relatively okay job at
all the BBC
at showing both sides of it. So one of the big attacking points for people that are very much into the BLM movement and the defund the police narrative. They're going to attack her on her record as an attorney, as district attorney in San Francisco, and then she was the Attorney General of California. So the BBC here, they talk about she has not come out and said that she wants to defund the police, but has said they need to think about reimagining how we do public safety in America, which it just sounds like a fence-sitting statement if ever I've heard one. She doesn't want to annoy any group of people, right? No, I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you can't do anything but sit on the fence there, can you? You've got to come out, you've got to appease these people. You can't say anything to antagonize them. But of course, if you're a serious politician, you can't really be thinking about defunding the police or any of these crazy radical ideas.
No, because they're massively unpopular. They're massively unpopular.
Absolutely. Look, I think if you are a progressive, if you are the sort of person who is calling for defunding the police, I think you're quite happy to see a woman of color just to be on the ticket. Okay, let's face it. This is quite it's not extraordinary. It's not an unprecedented event, but Democratic ticket looks a lot more like America than the Republican ticket.
If you look at from the identity politics angle, yes, right, because they have. I suppose.
Not just from an identity politics angle. You've got three ancient white men in Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's what I mean. So from the identity politics angle, right? Because you're just not basing their representation of the American people upon their policy and what they stand for. You're basing it upon what they look like, right? And the color of their skin. And their gender.
Sure.
I'm not even totally against the argument, because I think, like in the police, for instance, you want the police to represent the community, right? That they police, and I think you can make an argument that that's a good thing if obviously those in the highest levels of office do that as well. So then obviously when we talk about the Supreme Court, that's something that they talk about often. There's the diversity in the Supreme Court, the balance between men and women, and obviously they are probably ahead of the curve in that one when you compare it to obviously the presidency, which so far has been men and just obviously one non-white man. But
absolutely,
yeah. Listen, so healthcare. Sorry, go on. Well, I was
going to finish on the crime thing, and I was basically going to say, so if you are these kind of people who are going out in Portland and these sorts of places, are you entirely happy with what she's saying in terms of she's fence sitting when it comes to defunding the police? No, you're probably not. But at the same time, are you happy that you have representation of people of colour in the presidency? Or potentially in the presidency. Yeah, well, I think you're quite satisfied with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's the only thing you can cling to, isn't it? Because her record, I mean, and we'll come to that in more detail, but her record is at loggerheads with what the Defund the Police movement stands for, right? Or the Black Lives Matter movement stands for. And that is a huge hurdle that she has to overcome. As we know, that's the actual support for defunding the police is low. So it is this vocal minority. And when you actually poll people and, just average citizen who's not involved in the protest, you say, are you in favor of defunding the police? They say no. They think it's a ludicrous idea. But I think
absolutely.
Yeah, because of the image that it implies is that it's try and get rid of the police. People support police reform. They don't support getting rid of them, though. Many people probably say we need more funding, or they need more funding.
These people, they're not going to be voting on single issues. They're not going to be looking at crime and it dissuade them from voting for a Biden-Harris ticket. The Democrat Party and the Republican Party largely, they are coalitions of broad, diverse opinions. This is what happens when you have a two-party system. And the party that maintains its coalition, reinforces its coalition, and gets those people who might disagree quite substantially, especially if you look at, Sanders supporters, party that kind of gets them on board and gets them part of the coalition and mobilizes them. This is the party that's going to win the election.
I mean, that epitomizes really the whole point of the VP pick. This is obviously a bit different because we're talking about Joe Biden being the potential president to go along with that ticket. People are probably looking at this VP pick with a little bit more scrutiny than they would have done in the past with others. There's no doubt about that. Probably more so now than ever. But you're right, like the whole point of the VP pick is to say, well, look, here we've already got our candidate, so can we try and entice more members of these different coalitions with a VP pick? Can we appease them? If they're not fully supportive of our presidential candidate, can we appease them with the VP pick? So in the case of the Democrats, that's the progressives that they need to appease, because they feel, and I think rightly so, that their candidates, the people that represent them in Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, were shunned out, stopped from getting the nomination, and we know that the DNC did this in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, and they basically have done it again, although in a less overt way this time, by having all of the non-progressive candidates, shall we say, running in the primaries to effectively drop out at the same time and endorse Biden when it looked like Sanders was going to win, and it was enough for Biden to win in the end. So they're obviously, a lot of them are going to be outraged. I think rightfully so, because
well, outraged is a strong term. As we are recording, the DNC is taking place, and if you're looking at the agenda for the DNC, you have Elizabeth Warren, You have Bernie Sanders, who spoke yesterday at the time of recording. You have AOC due to speak, and all of them are going to endorse Biden and Harris.
Oh yeah, they're going to, because they're going to toe the party line. Does that mean that people? I mean, like I say, some people will look at it and go, "Oh, great, hey, Bernie Sanders has come out and said Biden's the guy, so Biden's the guy for me." Some people are going to say, "Well, he's a turncoat, and he's just more concerned about the Democrats winning than he is actually standing up for the things that he wholeheartedly supports and that he's been campaigning for a long time." So I mean, and obviously it's up to people's interpretation of it, and really that brings us on to probably the single biggest aspect of this when we're talking about defund the police. Yeah, that's a big thing right now, but that's a new movement, and I think it's largely isolated around this Black Lives Matter movement. Healthcare has always been the big thing when it comes to the progressives in America, and the Medicare for all. That's the big talking point. Obviously, again, with Kamala, she's kind of said, yeah, I support that, and then said, no, I don't support that. And again, just left it up for interpretation of the voter to kind of, it's like a religious text, right? You can look at it and interpret it however you see fit, right? You'll find whatever bias you want there to support your view if you really want to go out and vote for this candidate. Mm-hmm. So, she's come out and said, yeah, I do support it, and then sort of said, no, I don't support it, because, again, the issue is, same with the fund the police, they need to get moderate votes to win, and moderate voters in general probably aren't really in favour of this Medicare for all. A lot of the middle class are happy with their private insurance, right? Mm-hmm. They worked hard to get a good paying job, to get a good insurance plan, to get a good insurer, to get good healthcare, and they feel like, it's effectively going to be a downgrade. And this Medicare for all removes the private sector, removes the private insurers out of it. So she knows that. The Democrats know that. They know they still, they need to get some of those centre votes. And
they know as well, when you're looking at the progressive voters, they see healthcare as under threat from Donald Trump. One of his campaign policies was to scrap the Affordable Care Act, right? Yeah. He didn't do it, but he still talks about it. He still bangs on about it.
Yeah.
Well, if you are a progressive voter and you are a Sanders radical, as most of them are, and you have a choice between Donald Trump, who's promising to completely abolish Affordable Care Act, and you have Biden Harris. Harris flopping a bit. We don't really know where she stands, but still, in general, in favour of not as they would see it, improving the situation and taking baby steps towards a progressive path. You're going to go with Harris. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, that's if you're going to go and vote. The thing is, though, there is a legitimate argument that if you're part of that progressive left group, as we call it, you're looking at the Democratic committee and you're basically feeling as though they're just ignoring you and they're just giving you the middle finger with every decision that they're making. First with Biden, now with this VP pick, because, right? And so the question is, right, if you say to yourself, well, I'm just not going to go up and vote, what message are you trying to send there? You're trying to send a message to the Democrats. It's like, listen, if you can't get us to vote against Trump, right, who, wherever you stand on the spectrum, and whether or not you like, if you are a left-wing voter, you've either already gone to the Trump camp, or you're basically now looking at, do I want to vote for Biden or do I not want to vote for Biden? If you're in that group, there is a very good argument there to say, well, if we just don't turn up, right, then we're forcing their hand to say, you better make sure in that next election in 2024 that there is some representation, some real representation in the ticket of what we believe in. Yeah.
And you're risking 4 years of Donald Trump to do
Yeah,
that.
they're risking 4 years of Donald Trump, but they've already lived through 4 years of Donald Trump. So, you know,
barely.
the world didn't end. Well, barely is.
Barely, you know, from these people's perspective, right. What have they seen in the last 4 years? They're probably not too happy, right? They probably see anything. They probably see Satan as a better pick than Donald Trump.
Yeah, listen, these people
have you tempted to go out and vote him?
But those people are deranged, right? So,
well, yeah, but
we're not going to get through to them anyway. No, I'm talking about rational actors here, people that are looking at the situation and say, I want to see some change. I want to actually have a candidate. Just think about it. They want to have a candidate who they wholeheartedly support and have enthusiasm for. They're sick of voting against someone. They want to vote for someone once. This is type of person, where do they live?
If you are an ultra progressive who wants change in America, let's face it, it's a small portion of the American electorate to begin with. Let's face it, you probably live in California or New York, or you probably live in a heavily Democrat state, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
well, I don't know. I would have said scattered about everywhere. Really, there's
scattered about everywhere. But let's face it, it's not a huge percentage of the electorate. The only places these will matter are the swing states. Okay, if California, 700 Democrats don't turn up to vote, no one cares. Okay, that's fine. But if that happens in Texas, or if that happens in Georgia, but they just don't exist. You know, can you imagine these radical progressives calling for change?
Well, no, because we're talking about. Yes, they do exist. They do exist in Texas, and they do exist in Georgia. But I mean, if the election is coming down to Georgia and Texas, then I think it's probably a case of how much is Biden going to win at that point. Not will Biden win, so it won't really matter. It's the Rust Belt states, and then the Floridas, and that's it really.
And do you think
he has to make sure that he holds on to places like? Sorry, what?
Do you think these people exist in large enough numbers in the Rust Belt states, or Arizona, North Carolina, or Georgia, or Iowa, or Florida?
I think 90%, probably more, of people who have made up or think they've made up their mind now are not going to change their mind by the time the election comes about. Probably more than that, right? But this group here represents probably a reasonable fraction of those that remain that still aren't sure. So yes, I think that they can sway election in these swing states because in the battleground states they're basically even or roughly even. They only need to bring over 1 or 2%. So I'm not saying it will happen. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm saying that that's the risk that they're taking by having Kamala.
Heavily.
But listen, I mean, no, it's hard to look at it and say for sure, oh yeah, this is, the right choice over, because ultimately what we're saying here is, should they have gone for one of the progressive candidates, or the people that are seen as progressive candidates, or should they have gone for someone that has got effectively a more, and then we're going to come to this as well anyway, because it's not even cut and dry of whether or not Kamala has this progressive attitude or whether and record, or whether she has this moderate record. So moving forward,
we're jumping in ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I think the other big point, so gun control. Yeah. How can I put it with gun control?
She's a radical anti-gun candidate.
I suppose she is. Yeah, in comparison to
which she's talking about. If she becomes president, she's going to enact executive action to buyback.
Yeah, so how would the BBC put it here? And I don't think they tell the whole story here actually. But yeah, she would be in support of a mandatory buyback. I think and
that's a nightmare scenario.
That's on, as you described them before, military grade weapons, right? Not on. Those are on assault weapons, as they put it here. So I think when they're talking about that, they're talking about the AR-15s or whatever, right? The full semi-automatic, as CNN call them. So, but I think the other thing, the other big thing is she said, and again, this is why it's just very confusing to figure out what it is she really stands for, because she said that if she was elected, this is during the primary, she said, if I was elected president, I would give Congress 100 days to implement some, legislation, some reform to stop, I guess it was to stop, basically bad people getting hold of guns, so increase the background checks or whatever. And if that didn't happen, then she would take executive action. I'm not really sure what executive action can be taken when it goes against the Constitution. But she's not really clarified that, as far as I'm aware, since that point. Sure. So,
and it can be challenged and overturned. But I mean, in the current polling, we are actually looking at the Democrats have a higher chance of winning the Senate, the House, and the presidency than not. So if we're looking at a scenario where Joe Biden does, unfortunately, something happens to him and Kamala Harris takes control and she is president, that could be the end of the issue in the United States as we know it.
I think Biden would have to win by. I think the national vote would have to be fairly significant in Biden's favor.
538, as I checked,
win the Senate. To win the Senate. The House,
as I checked today, the Democrats have a 55% chance of winning the Senate.
Of winning the Senate. Okay. Well, that's as things stand today with this supposed 8-point gap or whatever it is, right?
Which you don't believe in.
Well, I don't believe that. I don't think anyone. I don't believe that there's an 8-point gap to begin with. No, and also I don't believe, even if it was an 8-point gap now, that it will be an 8-point gap come November, because the polls are effectively meaningless at this point in time, as far as I'm concerned. Like, in my opinion, people might disagree with me, but I think they're effectively pointless right now. Most people made up their mind who they were going to vote for a long time ago, before Biden was given the nomination, before coronavirus, before
why wouldn't the
Black Lives Matter. Because what I'm saying is that there is that small fraction of people who are willing to change their mind, and they can change their mind anywhere up to a day before the election. Because that's. So I just think it's pointless really thinking about it right now too much. It's good for trends, but anyway, because I've gone on a tangent, but I think it would be a massive achievement if the Democrats held all three levels. It would be absolutely huge if they get the Senate. I mean, if they win the presidency, they're probably winning Congress. That's probably a given at that point. But the Senate, I don't think so. So, but anyway, yeah, it's gun control. The thing about gun control is that it's the status quo, because it's just because you're fighting against the Constitution. The status quo is to just let things be as they are. Effectively, you're going to. And most people in some vague form or another say that they support gun reform, right? I think, basically. I mean, even Trump banned bump stocks, didn't he? I think it was about a year into his administration. So, that would have been seen as a left-wing maneuver. So I think when it comes to gun control, it's going to be hard. You struggle to win votes over gun control. I think it's quite easy, though, to lose votes over gun control, though. So I think this position here is not a good one, really. But again, it seems a little bit too extreme. Yeah, it just gives the Trump campaign too much ammunition to say she's going to take away your guns, because she has said, I'm going to take away your guns. And it doesn't really matter the context. It just matters that she said in some form or another, mandatory BIPAC. We're going to seize guns. It gives them loads of ammunition. Yeah, exactly.
And she's not pleasing all of the people all the time, because liberals will look at that and they will think, well, so she's not against banning guns, or she's not against my version of gun control. She's not an advocate of my version of gun control.
Yeah.
I'm going to be suspicious of her.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think, and here's the, and again, we're talking about attacking points for the Trump campaign. So the last point on BBC here, when they're talking about our views, immigration, she's in favor of a path to citizenship for illegal immigrant or undocumented immigrants. And she's in favor of healthcare for those. I just think, and maybe I'm out of touch, right? Maybe I'm out of touch with the feeling among American citizens. But I think fighting on immigration is a losing battle. I think basically having strong borders and clamping down on illegal immigration is a popular policy. So to come out and say, yeah, I want to offer a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants, and then give them access to healthcare as well, taxpayer healthcare, I just think is so easy for Trump to attack her on that. Easy.
I mean, there is a reason why Build the Wall was so successful. Build the Wall will resonate throughout history as one of the kind of great anti-immigration arguments, right? Not even an argument, but people will be saying in elections 30 years from now, build the wall, and it will mean nothing. There'll be no actual wall being built, but it will still be saying build the wall because it's synonymous with anti-immigration.
Yeah, I think across the globe, we're seeing a pushback against globalization from most countries. There is a pushback that these movements are increasing in size. We've seen from Trump and Brexit, the two prime examples. That this isn't
party. Matteo Salvini, the Front National, the AfD, almost every European country has a populist party who are very heavily anti-immigration.
Yeah, but it's if anything though, if it's happening in the UK and the US, then it could happen anywhere, right? Because these are two countries that in the Western world do not have a history of kind of romanticizing these. Well, they're labeled as populist ideas. So I don't think, and that's the thing, I don't think it's seen as a populist idea anymore. I don't think it's seen as a far fringe right wing idea to have strong borders. This is seen now as a perfectly rational response to globalization, increasing globalization, and
it wins votes, as you said. It wins votes, and
people aren't ready for this yet.
Absolutely,
and I think they will be eventually. There's to be philosophical about things, but if we envisioned a world, some this arbitrary point in the future, 100 years, 500 years, whatever, you would like to think that the sort of general wealth of all of these different countries, like African countries or wherever, South American, Asian, whatever, that all of these countries had a relatively similar wealth, right? And that things like having open borders don't really cause any issues, because all it does is just open up competition for the whole world to just kind of go where they want to go. The problem is when you have these different economies of varying wealth, it becomes an issue because they don't really go together very well. If you've got people from Mexico coming from this, a country with nowhere near the same level as opportunity and wealth and prosperity as somewhere like America, it doesn't mix very well. It doesn't, and everyone can see that.
And unfortunately, if you do look at that arbitrary point in the future, it's at the moment as things are going, we're never going to reach that point of an equivalency in wealth, partly because of climate change. Climate change disproportionately affects large swaths of the developing world. It spurs refugee crises. We've just been through one in Europe for the last 5 years or so. You look at the insecurity, both economic as well as physical, created by climate change. It's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse. And those populist ideas are, as you say, they're now mainstream ideas of pushing back against immigration. Well, they're going to become stronger and stronger and stronger because you're going to see more and more immigration.
Yeah, certainly. But I mean, whether I suppose at this point, whether or not at some point in the future, this vision of globalization is ever going to happen is just kind of a moot point at the minute, because in the here and now, there's pushback against it. People generally are not in favor of it. This is an unpopular policy, really, is the bottom line of all this. I think that's an unpopular policy. You're not going to win any voters over who weren't already voting Democrat by saying, hey, I really want to give a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants, or whatever you want to call it. So it would just actually go, I think, a little bit more in depth in terms of her record. I think you can effectively separate it into two halves. You have her record working in the Senate, and then you have her record as district attorney in San Francisco or attorney general of California, because they are very, very different if you're looking at it from that perspective of where, moderate, progressive, whatever. So we got a fact check here from CNN in terms of her record in the Senate, and she was described, I can't remember exactly where it came from. I mean, I think it says here somewhere actually, but the point is, someone said that Harris' voting record in the Senate is the most liberal. And they have determined from GovTrack that she has, in terms of voting or sponsoring on bipartisan bills, so how often she reaches out to the other side of the Senate, she has the lowest percentage of that, 15% of all of the Democratic senators. I suppose really the first question is, do you consider that an accurate representation of how liberal a senator is? How often they co-sponsor bipartisan bills?
I mean, absolutely not. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to use that as an indicator of how liberal one is, because it assumes there's, all Republicans are non-liberal and all Democrats are liberal, so therefore cross-aisle cooperation is somehow a decrease in liberalness. I think that's a pretty bizarre indicator, and I think certain news outlets who have a vested interest in portraying Kamala Harris as the most liberal candidate, and kind of twisting words a bit there.
Because even the things that she supported in the even the things that she supported while she's been a senator at some point in time, like things like Medicare for all, she has gone back on. So it does seem as though...
I don't mind that. I don't mind a politician changing their mind.
No, I don't mind a politician changing their mind, but we're talking about... I mean, to some extent, I do. It depends. It depends, because I think whether or not you agree with it, I think voters like to think of as politicians as people like them who have strong fundamental principles based upon their experiences in life that are the biggest influence when it comes to forming, a wider range of opinions on specific issues. So if those principles appear to adjust and change, then that to me is a sign of someone that isn't honest and can't be trusted. If their opinions are just on which policy to support change, but their principles appear to be the same, then I think that is maybe the opposite. That's a sign of someone that is trustworthy.
That's what's happened here, is it not? When you're talking about things like healthcare, the objective is how best to provide for the American people. How best do you guarantee the safety and security of the American people? And you'll have Republicans who say the best method to do that is a completely private system, and they genuinely believe that. Okay, that's their principle,
right? You said that with some skepticism there.
Well, perhaps a little. But Kamala Harris wants to guarantee the health and the security of the American people. And if somebody comes to her with a better argument than the one she has, well, I think it's a great thing for a politician to turn around. But I think she has to make the tough argument.
Yeah.
She has to go and sell it back to those voters. I don't think she's done that effectively.
Right. So is your feeling that she does portray this character of someone who is really concerned and principled about having this good healthcare system for all people in America? I mean,
I think so. I mean, for me, if I look at her actions, I think.
Do you think she cares? I suppose is the question. Is this just her trying to further her political career? Is that why she, chose Democrat, or is that something that, these are feelings, these are principles that are inherent in her character? I'm not passing judgment here because I don't think I've seen enough really to decide that for myself. But I'm just.
I mean, you use this phrase, furthering her political career. Okay. But it's a double-edged sword when you use something like that because politicians don't exist in a bubble and they know if they change their policies radically, it's going to impact, it could potentially destroy their political career. So I think for somebody who is in the national limelight, she's a senator, she was one of the top picks for the presidential candidate, one of the top picks for the VP role as well.
Yeah.
For her to turn around and change her opinion and to advocate for something that's so clearly very different on a whim, I think you don't. If you're making an estimation of what benefits you politically, then it doesn't benefit you politically.
I think this does benefit her politically
because she's VP, because she was chosen as VP.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think.
Then she loses her voter base. She loses.
I think. Well, she wants to be elected. Never mind being the choice for VP. She wants to be elected as VP. So she has to be seen as electable by the people who are choosing her as VP. And it seems they made the decision. We need to pick someone that is going to be seen as more moderate because it's too easy to be attacked if we're picking one of these progressive, the Karen Bass type figure or whatever, right?
That's a classic political paradigm too. For these progressive candidates, they can't actually change anything if they're not in power. So at some point, if you are a progressive and you do want to change things, you have to go in with a more moderate approach, perhaps, than you would like, because if you're unable to get elected, you leave the world in the hands of people like Donald Trump, and many people will be happy with that, but you're probably not. And it's the same with every left-wing party across the ages. You have to move closer to the centre in order to get elected.
No, I mean, I agree with that. It's a question of whether or not progressives or not agree with that. And I suppose, though, then the wider question is, if someone changes their policy or changes their support for whatever to move closer to the centre to make themselves more electable, does that mean then inherently that they are a career politician? Or do you think it's easy to rationalise that as saying, well, if you're not in power, then it doesn't matter what you believe in because you can't affect any change?
Well, I think that conclusion would be down to each individual, right? But it will certainly come across as a career politician. And I don't personally think so. I think it's more a sign of a principled approach to things.
I mean, I would, yeah.
Do you think?
Certainly, it'd be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because that question will be paramount, I think, to her likability. She wasn't liked during the primaries. There's no doubt about that. I think she was seen as one of the more likable front runners, shall we say?
I disagree. Compared to Karen Bass, you compared to
no. I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the VP shortlist. I'm talking about during the primaries when you had the sort of front runners like the Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden.
I mean, she was
and all basically Elizabeth Warren,
reasons.
Like Bloomberg, I suppose, to a certain point. I mean, he actually did end up, I think, with about maybe the fourth most votes or delegates or whatever, or the fourth highest percentage during the primaries. So, what I'm saying is, out of those, I think the impression was that she wasn't a very likable person, and I mean, that I suppose really comes on to what was probably the absolute low point. And I mean, some might even say what ended her chances. I don't know whether or not it's appropriate to say that or not, because it's impossible to say for sure. But when Tulsi Gabbard, ripped into her, as it's described here, which is probably a fair assessment of the situation. This, I think, really epitomizes the argument that we're talking about here, because Harris, at the time of the primaries, was branding herself as the progressive prosecutor poised to take on Trump. But when Tulsi Gabbard, I think, was pretty much the first person to kind of open that can of worms of her record as a prosecutor, and the sort of three big things. The first thing is that she laughed about smoking marijuana while also convicting, I guess thousands of people, or 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations. Mm-hmm. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row. And then the other big one is, I think this is at a time as well when California was fighting the forest fires, and I think they were using prisoners. They were paying them, like $2 an hour or something like that, to fight forest fires. And the claim is that she kept people in prison beyond their sentences. So I assume that means, I actually don't know whether the way in which she did that, whether it whether they just refused parole for that period of time or what. I assume that's what it would have been. So that they can continue to use them to fight the forest fires. So those are not. That's not the record of a candidate who you would consider a progressive prosecutor, is it?
Well, no, but I mean, you also have to realise, as an attorney general, her hands are bound by the law. So let's consider for a second the marijuana thing. Okay, she puts 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations. Yep. Okay, that's the law. Okay, that has to be done. She doesn't have to say what the law is. Well,
I mean, she does and she doesn't, because as an attorney general, she decides what the focus of her department is going to be. Is it going to be waste time, or whether you view it that way or not? Is it going to be seen as spending time convicting people for smoking marijuana or being in possession of marijuana, or is it going to be focusing on other things like violent crime or whatever, right? Because there's only so much time that they have in their office, and with the lawyers that they have, the prosecutors that they have, to convict so many people, right? Otherwise, you can't convict everyone all the time. They drop charges on all the time on things. So for them to convict 1,500 people, it seems to me that was quite a targeted approach, that they were like, we're going to get people for marijuana violations. So it was against the law, right? Lots of things are against the law. It could be that tomorrow there's
over a period of how many years in California for marijuana violations indicates.
Well, I guess we'd need to know the figures, which we don't know, is how many had been in the previous.
We do know.
Well, I guess the question is, was that more or less or whatever? But the point is that she admitted that she smoked marijuana before, and she even played, I think, what I call,
She didn't admit it.
The identity politics pandered to that identity politics crowd by sort of saying, hey, my father was Jamaican, right? Of course I smoke weed or whatever. And I think her father actually came out and criticized her for that by, I suppose, emphasizing the stereotype, which surely goes against that progressive narrative, doesn't it?
Well, I think, first of all, I think that was a joke. Okay. Let's be clear. If somebody says,
no. I think it was a joke. I think it was a joke, right? But we live in a world where jokes aren't allowed, are they? If you are on that loony left side, because if you're on that side, I think jokes aren't allowed. So you can't joke about that kind of thing, because what you're doing there is you're emphasizing stereotypes.
Oh, sure.
These are the rules that they set. Is all I'm saying. I don't agree with that, of course, but this is
okay. So the issue at hand is, does that indicate some great hypocrisy on Kamala Harris's part? Well, no, I don't think so, because Tulsi Gabbard is taking that perhaps poor in taste joke, and she's using that. She laughed about smoking marijuana.
Right.
Thus creating the implication of a hypocrisy without there actually being one. Why isn't
there hypocrisy there? Exactly.
Well, I don't think there is a hypocrisy. If somebody says I'm Jamaican,
no. I'm talking about. No, that's her. That's if we're talking. That's a different argument. We're talking about. She admitted to smoking marijuana, while her office convicted 1,500 people for smoking marijuana or possessing marijuana or whatever it was, right? Mm-hmm. So, you don't think that's hypocrisy?
I think it's a very fuzzy line. Okay, with things like that. Okay,
can't we just say? Can't we just say that that's wrong? Can't we just say that is very hypocritical of her?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
And can we not attack her on that? Can we not attack her on that?
The office of... Well, I mean, obviously you can attack her on it. I would say, in her defense, that the office of Attorney General is different to Kamala Harris, the person. Okay? Kamala Harris, the person, could smoke weed.
Right.
And if she has admitted it, then, okay, that's bad. But it doesn't mean that... because she's done it, she's not allowed to prosecute anybody who smokes weed in the state of California. She has her responsibilities as Attorney General.
Right. But again, I feel like you're missing the point. It's the contempt that she shows for the people that she has prosecuted when she laughs about it and admits to it herself, admits that she'd done it herself.
Well, I'm just not convinced that it is contempt. Or that it is hypocrisy. Okay. And you know what? Yeah, it's going to leave her open to attack on the election trail.
Okay.
But I'm tempted to give her, the benefit of the doubt on this one.
I think when we're talking... I mean, listen, the reason I bring this is when we're talking about her image from the perspective of the voter, and we were talking about whether or not we think she's likable or not, this does not make her likable. I think that's the point. She wasn't likable during the primaries. I think this is one of the reasons why she's not likable in the primaries, because she does not come across as someone that is principled, that is honest, that is trustworthy, that if they were president, they're not going to flip-flop on things. They're not going to do things... the office of president has been tarnished in America with a whole multitude of wrongdoing, I think it's fair to say. And when I think of someone like Kamala Harris, I think that's the sort of person that would probably quite happily do something like that, based upon a record of this. And I just think that's something that potential voters would be concerned about. And when I say that she's unlikable, I think this is a reason why. People care about this sort of thing.
I think most voters might be tempted to look at that and say, okay, yeah, that's not good. But I don't think it'll affect how she is liked. I don't think with the whole momentum behind her, you have all these. I mean, we saw in the BBC article before, you have these videos of her life story, and it's a compelling life story. The daughter of an African and a South Asian migrants. Yeah. I don't think, these sorts of isolated incidents constitute a disliking. There are some people who will dislike her for it. That's true. I don't think the entire electorate will. I don't think a majority of the electorate are going to dislike her. I don't think it's going to severely impact the polls or the voting at all.
Well, listen, if we put aside policy, which I think is fair to do, because I don't think a lot of people vote on policy all that often. I think for a lot of people, whether or not they can summon if they're a somewhat apathetic voter on the day of the election, whether or not they can summon the enthusiasm to go out and vote for Democrat. Maybe they're just, sometimes they vote, maybe they align themselves with the Democrats, but they don't, they don't vote that often, which there's probably a large number in that camp, right? So when it comes to the day that they're going to vote, whether or not they have that enthusiasm to vote for their candidate, I think a large proportion of that comes down to the likability of the person, their character, their personality. Trump, people love Trump. Whether or not you disagree with him on his policy, people think he's funny. They feel like they get along with him if they were sat down together. And that's why I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are enthusiastic about Trump, because they like him as a person. They think he's a cool guy, right?
Let's compare the two. When Donald Trump, and his vast catalogue of indiscretions, he had the grabbing pussy, to name but one thing. And these things pretty much eclipse Kamala Harris' story of marijuana and these things. And Donald Trump still has a devoted, a borderline fanatical following.
That's because he's very
and a wider appeal across the nation.
But I would say that's because of his character. So people like him a lot, and they think he's an honest guy, and they think he is someone that's who's come into politics when he was living this, very lavish lifestyle, obviously very successful.
TV star.
Or not, apparently, as some people say, which obviously is pretty ludicrous to suggest. When you look at the life he was living beforehand, a lot of people believe that he's come into politics to come and do a service to the American people. If you look at his track record, he's got a long track record of criticizing the government for the same reasons, for the same talking points, and he stood very true to those talking points throughout the past 40, 50, whatever years. You can look back at interviews from him from like the 80s, talking about China and talking about trade deals, and he's stuck with his tune on this one. This is what he believes in. I believe that's what he believes in.
Consistency of policy.
Yeah, but the thing is that even if you're like totally not aligned with him, you just admire the fact that this is a set of policy that he's clearly very passionate about. He came into politics because he wanted to do something about it. Now, obviously, there are some people that say he's just done it to enrich himself. I think that's kind of laughable, but I don't know who would go, who like the guys like, approaching 80, and if we're talking about wealth, why would Donald Trump of all people want to be president for wealth? It doesn't make any sense.
Make his presidential wage.
Yeah, exactly. It's just bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. He was already a big name. There were already
going off track.
Yeah, we are going off track anyway. But yeah, so let's just wrap it up. I suppose it's sort of 5 minutes on this one. I think the real question here is, but let's put aside likability or let's not put it aside. But when it comes to Kamala Harris, is she a good pick or not? Do you think that she will gain more votes from, I think really the question is, do you think she will gain more votes from the moderates than votes she loses from progressives? Because although Trump campaign is attacking her as being this, member of the regressive left, and looking at her voting record in the Senate and her stance on Medicare or gun control and things like that.
These attacks, I don't think they have much substance behind it, and I think it's very clear that she isn't a member of the radical left. I think that Kamala Harris is going to pick up votes across the board. I think that the progressives she loses are going to be so radical and so based in democratic strongholds as to be irrelevant, and such a tiny portion of the populace. I think she's a likable woman of color, and I think that matters in the current election.
Okay.
I think she's going to be she knows how to campaign. I think she's going to steamroller a campaign. I think she's going to pick up a hell of a lot of votes.
Okay. I think my opinion is possibly the opposite.
Slightly different.
Yeah, it's possibly the opposite. I don't know if it's the complete opposite. I don't believe that she would pick up that many moderates at all, really, as we call them, because we look at the things that she actually stands for. I don't feel like there's a whole lot in there that people who were considering Trump it's not going to be enough to convince them to switch sides or switch allegiance or whatever, or even among the haven't decided. Their primary concern is going to be the economy. When they look at someone like Donald Trump, they're going to have more faith in him to look after the economy and lead the recovery than they are on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has no record. Yeah, Kamala Harris has no record. Well, yeah, because of coronavirus. But Kamala Harris has no record when it comes to the economy. She's not proven that she can do anything on an economic scale. Joe Biden, I don't think is particularly trusted on the economy. So
after 8 years with Obama, really?
Yeah. After 8 years with Obama, I don't think he's particularly... I think, well, okay, listen, he's about as trusted as any sort of centrist Democrat is.
I think he's as trusted as Obama, and Obama left office with positive approval ratings, 55%. More American...
That's because... Oh my God, that's because he ran out... That's because he ran 2 terms. When his approval ratings were like all over the place. Like people criticize Trump's approval ratings. If you compare Trump's approval ratings to Obama's approval ratings,
Trump's
have pretty much actually been Trump's have pretty much been relatively the same, because he does seem to be so polarizing. People are just always going to hate him regardless, and people are always going to like him regardless, and that's effectively stayed the same around the sort of 40% mark for the entire 4 years. Obama's fluctuated all over the place. He's been lower than that, he's been higher than that.
And Biden's approval ratings are double digits higher than Trump's at the moment.
Right, because he doesn't do anything. He just sits in the basement and comes out once a week. So it's like people, if you never see the person, it's hard to say, oh, I really don't think he's doing a very good job. People don't think, oh, well, Biden's not really coming out and doing interviews very often. They don't really pay second thought to that. They just go, the guy's not doing anything. They never see him. They never see him on TV. It's hard to dislike someone that you never see. So,
okay, be that as it may, if that's the state of affairs on polling day, then Joe Biden wins.
Well, I don't know, maybe not. I think because he'll be forced out the basement by then, so his approval ratings is going to come right down, because it's Joe Biden and he can struggle to put a couple of sentences together. So, what even point was I even making now? Because we're talking right. So Kamala Harris, I don't think she's going to appeal very much to the moderates. For all the reasons that I just said, because ultimately it's going to come down to the economy, and they're going to trust Trump more with the economy. What I think she will do is she further emphasizes this feeling among those on the far left or further left of the Democratic coalition of voters that she is not someone that's going to stand up for them, for what they stand for, Medicare for all or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. And they don't stand for defund the police, and they're just going to think this is another big middle finger where DNC, they're just going to expect us to turn up and vote. Well, I don't think that they are all just going to turn up and vote. I think they're going to be shocked and not learn their lessons from last time. Maybe And I hope 4 years from now, we see two candidates that actually have a lot of enthusiasm from both sides. And we actually see not a lot of people voting against the other candidate, but voting for their candidate. Because I think that is the best we can hope for in the two-party system.
Do you want to see Emmanuel Macron in US politics?
No, I mean, it's not even possible anyway. I don't know. I know you've got your love affair with him. Yeah, I think most people don't even know who he is in America, to be honest with you. So, yeah, so he's probably got really high approval ratings in America. I bet you Macron's approval ratings are really good in America because like, I don't even know who that guy is. Same with Joe Biden. They're like, well, I never even see him. Yeah, that's good enough for me. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, we'll see what happens. I think will be interesting to see if there's going to be any significant shifts in the polls now, and looking at the approval ratings of Kamala and Joe as time goes on. But
it's going to be interesting,
yeah,
and
we might look.
I think we might see a Kamala Harris run a blitz campaign. I think she's going to really resonate with you.
I'm going to hold you to it. I think she's going to
really resonate with black voters and women voters. I think she's going to be a key figure to watch throughout this campaign.
I listen, some people are like that way, but I don't think that all the electorate is as stupid and
as me,
narrow-minded. Yeah, and one-way thinking as that. In the same way that I don't think that Democrats are going to vote for... so I'm doing a Joe Biden now, but in the same way, I don't think that black Democratic voters are going to vote for Kanye West just because he's black. I don't think that they're going to... I don't think, for the vast majority of people, I don't think Kamala Harris being black is going to affect what they think at all of her. I mean, there will be some people, but by and large, I don't think it's going to affect them at all.
It's the whole package. Kanye West has nothing going for him as a presidential candidate. He's an idiot, okay?
That's
Kamala Harris is a
horrible thing to say about Kanye West.
No, well, okay, well, disagree with me, but he doesn't have anything going for him as a politician. Kamala Harris, a serious politician, great backstory, long career. Okay, she's flip-flopped a bit on policies, but she does have the policies. She is telling people what she's going to do. Been endorsed by the entire Democratic Party. She's completely serious, and she looks like America.
Wow. Okay, you should go work for her.
You should
get yourself on the.
I'm very cheap these days. I'll do anything.
You sound about as honest and trustworthy as she does, and you sound about as much conviction in those words as she does when she talks about her policies. So, yeah, listen, we've droned on about it long enough. Like I say, it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here. And I can't wait. I honestly cannot wait to see how this affects things and the trends now in terms of the polling.